two critical and important foundational characteristics of Hopkins psychiatry. Each of them represents an approach to coordinating actions and modes of thought that have advanced psychiatric practice and research. One enterprise was our insistence that our students learn a thorough way of gathering information about the nature, course, and conscious expressions of the mental disorders that patients presented to them in the wards and clinics of our hospital. This enterprise, inspired in part by the example of Hopkins' first psychiatric professor, Adolph Meyer, had at its root the straightforward medical presumption that the systematic gathering of information about what could be known about the lives of our patients and how they presented to the doctors would provide a realistic depiction of their problems. We were claiming that the facts of conscious life, which could be identified and corroborated, would do more to advance our understanding of our patients than the murky Freudian presumption that, quote, nothing is what it seems, unquote. In this most specific way, we propose to move psychiatry away from psychoanalysis, a discipline, after all, built around the logic of dreaming, and towards the assumption that it is in the real world where what can be observed and publicly confirmed provides the basis for medical practice and research. This approach led to several achievements. Perhaps the most public and noteworthy were our papers promoting gradable measures of the cognitive state of patients affected by brain diseases. Our so-called mini mental state examination is now employed worldwide, and editors have recently identified its initial publication as the most frequently cited paper in the psychiatric and neuroscientific literature. Parenthetically, and to identify one of our previous happy collaborations with you, the Spanish version of the mini mental state examination was validated here in the psychiatry department of the University of Zaragoza, an effort and enterprise that gave our method a great boost for its worldwide application. Our second enterprise followed logically after standardizing the assessment of patients, was providing from those assessments our answer to the question, what is mental illness? How did we answer that? The assessments clearly indicated that mental disorders differ in nature and emerge within the experiences of patients in several different and specific ways. Some mental disorders seem to break unexpectedly into the patient's life and for a time, perhaps permanently, disrupt its natural course. Other disorders emerge more unsurprisingly and seem to represent mental responses to life's challenges, shaped by such matters as personal characteristics, habits and choices of behavior, or the severity of the adversity confronted in life by the patient. Similar distinctions had been made by Karl Jaspers in his General Psychopathology of 1913, where he distinguished mental disorders best explained by neuropathology from those best understood by clinical empathy for a person facing and responding to life. We expanded on this distinction between explanation and understanding by replacing its rather sharp alternatives with perspectives, as we call them, or ways of looking into the life history and presentation of patients so as to mingle explanation and understanding in a fashion fitting the patient's condition and informed by the neurobehavioral and psychological sciences surrounding psychiatry today. In the early 1980s, with the first edition of our book, The Perspectives of Psychiatry, we provided the Hopkins answer to the question, what is mental illness? We put forward 4 ways of making sense of the various expressions of mental distress and disorder based on distinctive generative sources. To list them briefly, the perspective of disease proposed that some mental disorders were best understood as owing to disruptions of brain structure or functional neurointegration. These include such disorders as dementia, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. In contrast, the perspective of dimensions proposed that some mental troubles were best understood as emotional reactions in patients rendered vulnerable to such feelings because of their place on such universal psychological dimensions as intelligence, emotional temperament, or maturity. These include patients with cognitive subnormality or with extremes of emotional reactivity, such as the histrionic, borderline, or psychopathic patients. The perspective of behavior proposed that some mental disorders derive from the motivating drives that affect conscious attitudes and lead some patients into disruptive activities, choices, and habits. Here would be included such conditions as anorexia nervosa, drug addiction, and alcoholism. Finally, the perspective of the life story proposed that some mental disorders emerge from life encounters perturbing to any human being in essentially normal ways. Here we include such conditions as bereavement, homesickness, demoralization, and post-traumatic stress disorder. The authority of these perspectives in this book derived from how they specified and differentiated the most rational pathways of treatment and research for the conditions each encompassed. They also provided a coherent structure upon which we could build a cooperative and mutually supportive academic faculty, former members from which are now populating other psychiatric departments in our nation. As some of you in the audience may know, the Perspectives of Psychiatry in both editions was translated into Spanish by your Professor Lobo, published by the Prensa Universitas de Zaragoza, and has become known to Spanish-speaking psychiatrists throughout the world. Another example of our happy collaboration with this university and with a former member of your faculty and our faculty. Today, I do not plan, however, to specify in what ways the Hopkins perspectives support and in what ways they challenge the official American method of psychiatric diagnosis and practice presented in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, so-called DSM, of the American Psychiatric Association. At Hopkins, we are not arguing against this manual. We are instead saying that DSM's approach cannot be the last word in psychiatry. This is a descriptive rather than an explanatory approach to the question, what is mental illness? DSM does not answer that question, but sets it aside by listing hundreds of examples of mental illness, all of which it claims have as yet no rational explanation. We need to work with some explanations after we have worked with description. The future and purposes of psychiatry are today clearer than when I started my career in the 1960s. Psychiatry now identifies itself as a discipline of medicine rather than the seat of an ideology. Unique skills characterize its practitioners, and the paths for progress I've depicted are plain enough to encourage students with ambition to enlist in its ranks. I'm pleased that you, at the University of Zaragoza, where Ramon y Cajal, the greatest brain scientist of the 20th century, received his education, recognize the contributions we've made at Johns Hopkins and celebrate them in such a pleasant way for me today. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, profesor McHugh, y muchas gracias también, con mi felicitación, al coro que nos está acompañando en este acto académico solemne. Tenía previsto que mis palabras fueran breves y van a ser aún más breves. Profesor Fuster, Professor and Mrs. McHugh, autoridades civiles, académicas, profesores que nos acompañáis hoy aquí, profesionales de la gestión o de la actividad directamente sanitaria, estudiantes, personal de administración y servicios, estudiantes, señoras, señores. Hoy recibimos en nuestra universidad, en su claustro de doctores, a dos nuevos doctores que lo son por causa de honor, por causa de su relevancia. Tengo que decir que además, en este caso, destaca que lo sean por su relevancia médica, tanto clínica como investigadora. Y es una satisfacción para la universidad mostrar nuestro agradecimiento porque ambos hayan aceptado ser doctores de nuestra universidad. Muchísimas gracias a ambos, profesor Fuster, profesor McHugh. Muchísimas gracias a los padrinos, no solo por haber estado desde el principio en la inducción de estos doctorados honoris causa, sino también por haberles acompañado, por haber defendido su doctorado y por estar ahora aquí con nosotros. Es una gran satisfacción tener al profesor Fuster en el claustro de doctores. Yo creo que sus méritos han quedado suficientemente resaltados. Estamos ante un brillante clínico, un brillante cardiólogo, un brillante investigador biomédico en el que sus muchos premios ya han sido citados, pero yo me voy a referir solo a dos situaciones completamente suficientes por sí mismas para indicar lo que significa el profesor Fuster en la ciencia cardiológica, en la ciencia médica y en general en la ciencia. Estos dos hechos biográficos son que hoy es el director del Centro Nacional de Investigación Cardiovascular, uno de los centros de investigación de referencia en nuestro país, al mismo tiempo que lo compatibiliza con ser el director del Mount Sinaí Heart. Muchísimas gracias, profesor Fuster, por toda la colaboración que ha venido prestando a nuestros investigadores, también reflejada en el hecho de este gran metaanálisis que está realizando entre las poblaciones de General Motors y el Banco de Santander. Profesor McHugh, de nuevo decirle que es una enorme satisfacción, un honor tenerle en nuestro claustro de doctores. Ha quedado también muy bien reflejado su historia como investigador, como clínico en el ámbito de la psiquiatría. Y de nuevo basta señalar que el profesor McHugh es el psiquiatra jefe del Johns Hopkins Hospital. El Johns Hopkins, para todos los que conocen el sistema de salud norteamericanos, es uno de estos hospitales emblemáticos. En algunos rankings de los Estados Unidos ha aparecido durante muchos años, una década, como el mejor hospital de la nación. Muchísimas gracias también por su colaboración continua con nuestra universidad. Muchas gracias en particular a todo lo que ha supuesto la formación del profesor Lobo, profesor que ha liderado en los últimos años todo lo que supone el grupo de psiquiatría del Hospital Clínico Universitario Lozano Blesa. Muchísimas gracias, profesor McHugh. Yo me voy hoy habiendo modificado algo mi paradigma en el conocimiento de la enfermedad. Y lo puedo decir con la satisfacción de haberlo visto desde dos maneras diferentes. Digo que la enfermedad tiene dos raíces fundamentales, dos causas fundamentales, dos cimientos o pies fundamentales, la genética y el entorno. Hoy he aprendido, primero, que en lugar de enfermedad vamos a hablar de salud. Y dos, que decir que tiene tres pilares fundamentales: la genética, el entorno y la conducta humana cuando hablamos de enfermedad humana. Muchísimas gracias por haber modificado esta perspectiva de lo que es la enfermedad, la salud y sus causas. Yo solo quiero pedirles a los dos nuevos doctorandos que se sientan orgullosos de ser doctores honoris causa de nuestra universidad. Es una universidad que tiene ya casi 5 siglos. Esto no es un fallo de memoria, esto es un fallo de pronunciación. 5 siglos de historia. 5 siglos de historia habiendo nacido con la medicina en sus propios orígenes. Y 5 siglos de historia que podemos representar con muchísimos profesionales de prestigio. Me voy a limitar a dos. Uno, Miguel Servet, algo más que un profesional médico, todo un pensador, protestante, víctima de su libertad de pensamiento teológico y de su libertad de observación médica. Pero alguien singularmente relacionado con nuestra universidad es don Santiago Ramón y Cajal. Don Santiago Ramón y Cajal, aragonés de espíritu, aunque nació en una pequeña circunscripción de Navarra dentro de Aragón, Petilla de Aragón, pero él también se sentía navarro y aragonés. Santiago Ramón y Cajal, que estuvo un tiempo como director del Museo Anatómico aquí en Zaragoza, ligado a la Facultad de Medicina, y que es un honor para nosotros haber contribuido a ser un hombre con talento, aunque luego la manifestación del talento se viera en la Universidad de Valencia y en la Universidad de Madrid, donde desarrolló el grueso de sus investigaciones. Siéntanse orgullosos de estar en nuestra universidad. Nosotros nos sentimos orgullosos de tenerle en nuestro claustro de doctores. Desde hoy, el profesor Fuster, el profesor McHugh, es uno de nosotros. Y se lo vamos a demostrar expresándole nuestro agradecimiento, nuestra satisfacción y nuestra alegría de tenerle ya en la Universidad de Zaragoza. Muchas gracias. Y nos despediremos puestos en pie, cantando el Gaudeamus Igitur bajo la dirección altruista, colaboradora, de buena conducta de nuestro coro. Con esto acabamos este acto académico. Muchas gracias a todos.